The last buy that we did was a buy bust where we had to use force on 2 separate people. It was right under a venue where a band was playing. It was loud. It was chaotic. And we had another deal set up, and we rushed to it. And, we ended up a guy going to the hospital with a serious head injury with between 30 to 50% chance of survival when he hit the door at the ER.
You are a warrior.
321 status.
What kind of vehicle is it?
You are the very best your nation has to offer.
911.
Multiple shots fired.
They're asking you to lead.
5, we need a Bearcat.
It's up to us.
So 133, I need somebody that's got a visual on where the shooter is.
You must be sound in mind, body, and spirit.
42, where's the officer down? I have a rescue helicopter that wants to land and help.
This is the podcast that will make you the one.
Copy, running eastbound.
The one that will bring everyone back.
Trouble, we have shots fired. Give me back up now.
Because no one else is coming.
We're going to have an officer shot. 100 block of East Street.
Suspect is down.
This is the Squad Room.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Squad Room Podcast, the place for cops who want to create more resilience, improve their work-life balance, and attack each day with positivity and a passion for the work that we do. On this show, we cover the tactics and strategies you can use every day to create a life worth living both in and out of uniform. My name is Garrett Tesla, and I'm a full-time sergeant for a sheriff's office in Southern California, and I'm on a mission to build a world where first responders wake up inspired, feel confident at work, and go home safe knowing they've spent their time in a worthy cause. Before we get to our guest, I want to remind you of a few things. First, if you're on social media, make sure you're following us at the Squad Room and that you've liked the Facebook page. And also make sure you joined our Facebook group. Just search the Squad Room group to join. But most importantly is that you head over to thesquadroom.net and get signed up for our mailing list. People on that list get exclusive access to free resource downloads. Also, I send out content that is exclusive to that list. So don't miss out on something that can help you in your life, either in or out of uniform. So join us at thesquadroom.net. All right, my guest today, Jeff Smith. Jeff began his career in 1991 as a police officer in Maryland. I won't tell you what grade I was in when Jeff started his career, so he's obviously got many, many lessons. He spent 28, almost 29 years working in law enforcement, most of it working undercover in a narcotics unit. Jeff's worked cases with the DEA, FBI, HSI, U.S. Customs, Maryland State Police, Delaware State Police, Virginia State Police, and many, many other agencies all over the region on the eastern seaboard. Jeff has participated in literally thousands of operations, both as a detective and a supervisor. And in his 10 years as a drug enforcement supervisor, Jeff's unit was responsible for over 1,200 arrests. He supervised several thousand undercover operations and participated as a detective in many, many more. Jeff has helped design and implement numerous long-term undercover operations that have resulted in as many as 41 arrests in one op. His unit ran an undercover taxi company in Ocean City for 2.5 years, resulting in dozens of indictments for felony drug distribution offenses. Jeff also spent about a decade as a member of this department's SWAT team, and he's been a crisis negotiator and an assistant negotiator team commander for 12 years. Now, if you hear Jeff's name, I know a lot of people have come to this podcast through street cop training, and thank you for being here. Thanks to Dennis, of course, for being on the show and his support of what we're doing here. You have probably heard Jeff's name. He's one of their instructors. He's got one of their most popular classes with his street survival class, and he's one of the lead instructors over there, and he helps on-ramp or onboard new instructors for street cop as well. In this episode, you're going to learn how his ego almost got him killed during a drug bust, and how he handled the stress of working such a dangerous assignment for so long, and what he wants young, aggressive cops to know about the job in this environment that we're in right now. Jeff is a fantastic leader. He's become a good friend ever since we recorded this episode, and this episode actually was recorded several months ago, and we're just getting to releasing it now. And so I'm excited to get this out. Jeff's a wealth of information. He's as humble a guy as they come. And, we do these episodes where we talk about lessons learned, and they're always super popular. They're always some of the most downloaded because we all want to we all don't want to make the same mistakes that people came before us if we can prevent it, or at least that's the idea. Certainly some people are not interested in improving, but if you're listening to this podcast, I know that doesn't include you. And so we do these episodes of what I've learned, where we have someone look back on their career. And it's always a fascinating talk, to look at the different perspectives. And Jeff gives some very honest self-assessment about his own career. And to say that some of those things wouldn't happen today is certainly an understatement, because things change regardless of where you are, and things are always changing. When I started to where it is now, things have changed. And by the time I retire, I imagine that the new guys coming in will kind of be blown away by the way we used to do things when I started. I'm quickly becoming the old school guy in my department. All right, so anyway, here's our interview with Jeff Smith. Please enjoy it. It's fantastic. When we think about the equipment we carry with us on our person, we often assume that it's our sidearm that's the most important. But I disagree. Sure, it's important. But think about how important your radio is and how often you use it. Statistically, you're likely to go your entire career without ever firing your sidearm. However, you won't go more than a few minutes in patrol without using your radio. It's your lifeline to the outside world. It's how we call for help, set up a perimeter, request an ambulance, or maybe a supervisor. And think about it. If you do end up using your sidearm on duty, it's very likely that the next thing you'll use is your radio to tell dispatch shots fired. Our radios are incredibly important to our jobs and to help keep us and our partners safe. And it's important to make sure that you're using quality equipment. We can't control the quality of the radio we're issued by our department, but we can often control some of the accessories that we use to make them better and make us safer. I'm proud that CommGear Supply is a sponsor of this episode. Head over to commgearsupply.com and you will see their massive inventory of microphones, earpieces, speakers, batteries, headsets, push-to-talk sets, and everything else you need to help you stay in comms and stay safe. Their customer service team will help you make sure you get the right accessories compatible with your system. Now here's the coolest part about CommGear Supply and why I'm so proud that they work with us. They have a line of duty protection warranty on many of their products. Yeah, that's right. If your gear ever breaks in the line of duty, they'll replace it. And prices are tax-free, and it's always free shipping on orders inside the U.S. and even to some parts of Canada. Go to commgearsupply.com right now and use that coupon code THESQUADROOM to get 10% off your order. Make sure you also follow them on Instagram at commgearsupply and let them know that you appreciate their support of the show. This episode is sponsored by officerprivacy.com. In the age of the internet, social media, and smartphones, there's so much amazing information out there that's at our fingertips. I can research any topic or person I want to and learn all about them, their family, and way more information than I really should be able to. The problem is people can do that same research on us too. Whether we like it or not, our information is on the internet, out there for people to find. Just accepting this and doing nothing isn't an option. We as cops have a giant target on our back these days. I don't know if you noticed, but it's kind of rough out there. Sometimes that's literally a target, and it's life or death. And other times it's just dealing with potential harassment. Either way, we don't want to expose our families to those risks. Being careful about what you post on social media, that doesn't go far enough. It's easy for a bad guy with an iPhone and free Wi-Fi to hunt you down. That's why officerprivacy.com exists. My friend Pete James is the founder, and he spent 25 years in law enforcement here in California, using much of his career to hunt down criminals and evidence on computers and on the internet. Pete knows how easy it is to find you, and since he's one of the good guys, he can help. OfficerPrivacy.com offers 2 packages to choose from to help you clean up your side of the internet. Their premium service, the one I use, allows you to sit back and let the professionals do the work, where they will work to scrub the internet's top 30 people search sites that can expose your home address. Then they will work to maintain your privacy by monitoring those same sites. If you show up again, they'll remove you again. And here's the thing that other privacy companies don't tell you. You will show up again. It's impossible to keep your stuff off the internet just that one time. It takes constant diligence. That's why their team is so helpful. They do it for you. Now, they also offer an at-home solution for those of you that have the time and technical ability to do it yourself. Using their proprietary software, you can remove yourself and your family members from these same top 30 people search sites on the internet, and then use their software to conduct audits as often as you'd like to make sure you haven't gotten added back yet. To learn more about how you can keep safe, check them out at officerprivacy.com/thesquadroom. When you sign up through that link, you'll get a free USB data blocker, and your first month of monitoring is free. That's officerprivacy.com/thesquadroom. Jeff Smith, welcome to the Squad Room.
How is it going?
Ah, man, it's great. I'm excited to talk to you for a whole host of reasons. And right before I hit record, learned of another reason, our shared affiliation, our shared love of music and the music industry, and the career path you almost took before becoming an officer, we were sharing some stories about going to the 930 Club in DC as
Yeah,
younger guys.
in another
um,
lifetime.
Another lifetime. Yeah, seriously, right? It gets further and further away every day.
It
But
does.
what I'm really excited to talk to you about today, because we won't, elaborate on the music stuff too much for the sake of our listeners' patience with us. But anyway, I love talking to other cops who have gone through the journey, especially retired cops who are just recently retired, like yourself, who have gone through the journey, can now turn back around and offer a hand of help, lend a hand to other officers out there. And you're one of those. You're a big one in that sense, with all the teaching you do all around the country with your street cop classes, and just your efforts. Like the way we started communicating even was you were sharing some very positive feedback with me about the show and just reaching out, and that's how we started a conversation. So I'm excited to have you. You know, like I mentioned, you're affiliated with Street Cop and Street Cop training, and we've had Dennis Benino on the show, who was fantastic, and he's been a huge inspiration for me and many other cops. And we talked about, just before we were recording, Nick Wilson,
Right.
who has also been on my show, who you got introduced to through this show, and now Nick is instructing with you. And I think that's amazing that I'm helping to get Nick's message out, which then gets picked up on a platform such as Street Cop to teach around the country. So, I'm just inspired by the idea that there's guys like you out there, man. So I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, it's a huge honor. It actually made me a little bit nervous because it kind of, like I was telling you before we started recording, kind of feel like a big fish in a little pond almost because of some of the guests you've had. But if you want to talk to a cop that's had an interesting journey, mine's been pretty interesting at times.
Well, let's dive right into it, and let's tell everybody about your career, and just kind of give us the 1 minute brief on where you're from and the kind of agency you worked for and that sort of stuff.
So I'm from Maryland originally, or from Delaware originally. We're right on the Mason-Dixon line. So I lived about 8 feet from Maryland, and I grew up in the Delaware, Maryland area. And I worked at the Ocean City, Maryland Police Department, which is right on the East Coast. We're literally 2 hours from Philly, 2 hours from DC, 2 hours from Baltimore, and 2 hours from Norfolk. And we had about 118 full strength. And because we're a tourist town, we're a major tourist destination in the area, the size of our agency doubled in the summer season. So we brought on double the amount of cops that we normally had. So it was a good experience. We had all the specialty units you could want, but the department was small enough for you to not get lost. But it still had opportunity. And I was extremely blessed in the time that I was there, not only because of where I worked and the type of work I got to do, but the people that I worked around also were phenomenal. And, I always like to say that everybody I worked with was probably better than me. I just have a bigger mouth than they do.
Well, that mouth eventually got you promoted to sergeant, right? And,
Yeah.
Logistically, how does an agency hire? Because I know this is more popular, it seems, on the East Coast than the West Coast, about hiring part-time cops. Are these like cross-sworn from other agencies that you just pay overtime and contract out to other agencies, or do you legitimately hire like a guy who's a part-time cop?
We legitimately hire part-time cops, it's mostly college kids and guys coming right out of the military over the last 20 years. And we do an abbreviated academy. The state of Maryland has an exception to their Maryland police officer certifications just for our agency because of the manpower requirements in the season and the amount of money we bring into the state of Maryland, I guess. So we put on abbreviated academies, and for the longest time, we were doing 2 academies of sometimes 50 plus, anywhere from 30 to 50 plus officers every spring.
Wow. That's quite a production just in itself.
It is. And they're fully sworn. I mean, they have full arrest powers, and they're carrying guns. They're making traffic stops, making arrests, doing investigations.
Huh. Wow.
It borderlines on nutty, honestly.
That idea is a very foreign concept, I think, for those of us on the West Coast who are kind of entrenched in the opposite way,
Yes.
So you mentioned that your agency had a lot of opportunities. That's fantastic. It's getting harder and harder to find agencies that continue to to offer those things because, everyone's getting paired back. What are some of the things that you got to do during your career?
So I spent probably 2/3 of my career, almost 20 years, in the criminal investigation division, most of that in the Narcotics Unit, and some of that time in what we now call the Special Enforcement Unit. And I did a real brief stint as a sergeant in major crimes, which is our suit and tie guys. So we had, in the criminal investigation division, we had Intel, we had HSI in our building. We had a couple of different TFOs. We had county TFOs with a drug task force, and then we had our major crimes and our narcotics and special enforcement guys. I spent 11 years on the SWAT team as a tactical member, and then I spent 12 years as a negotiator with the SWAT team.
Oh, interesting. So tourist town means lots of the things you expect, partying, bring people from outside, bringing stuff in, narcotics. You just said it.
Oh, yeah.
So you did most of your time there in some sort of narcotics or capacity or special investigations capacity, which meant you did a lot of time in plainclothes or undercover work, right?
Yep.
And so much so that that's now what you teach, right? What do you teach now that you've gone through all that whole career?
So I do 2 classes for Street Cop. I do one called Street Academy, which is survival tactics for police officers, which kind of focuses on science and the things that we can learn and understand to use preemptive tactics to keep us from getting into use of force confrontations, because we spend so much time as an industry or a profession talking about how to get out of a fight once the fight has already erupted. And, just in my opinion, we don't spend enough time treating that as a system, not only the physical tactics of a fight, but the preemptive part before we get into a use of force confrontation, and how to use science and understand the things that we do each and every day, and how the little things matter the most on the big stage when it comes to preventing that confrontation. And I also teach a class called Buying Dope, Tactics for Undercover Operations. And it's essentially a class on how to run a safe face-to-face undercover meet with a bad guy. And I'm getting ready to put up a physical surveillance operations class too with Street Cop.
Well, that's all my undercover guys. They always say that the surveillance class is one of the most fun.
Yeah.
So many different things I want to go into here because, we don't this is actually a conversation I had with Dennis where, some of the things that you talk about in your street survival class are things that we really should be teaching more in depth in the academy.
No
right.
doubt.
And really going
No
in depth
doubt.
in what are the for you, what are the main or key points or the key takeaways you try to get someone who takes that class? What are the key takeaways you try to impart on them in that topic? Because that alone is we could do an hour on that alone. We could do an hour on buying dope. We could do an hour on physical surveillance. But I want to give people some highlights. What are those?
So in the Street Academy class, one of the things I really, really focus on is that we have a lot of generational leftover. I'm a generational leftover in police work, but we have a lot of generational leftover from the way we used to train. And if you listen to the top minds in the industry, like Bill Lewinsky and Brian Willis and some of these other guys that really know their stuff when it comes to training, we still, in a lot of police academies and a lot of police training, do block training, where you come in, you do a lot of training real quick in a short, condensed amount of time. You don't really come back to it that often. What we should be doing is skill maintenance training, where we do a little bit of training and we maintain those skills by constantly enhancing our knowledge in those fields. And if we don't do that, then that lot of training that we did 15 years ago in the academy is essentially useless to us. Mm-hmm. So in Street Academy, I talk about the little things, going right back to just watching how people behave, understanding why the use of time is important. I mean, probably everybody's heard the saying that distance gives you time and cover and distance give you time to make decisions. And that's really the focus of my entire day, is how to use time to give you the chance, and how to create time and distance between you and a bad guy, even when you're face to face, to give you the ability to not get caught up in that fog of confrontation where our brain goes straight down the crapper. And for 3/4 of a second to 2 seconds, we have a complete inability to make rational decisions, which can get us behind the 8 ball and really get us into a bad spot, which can snatch your life, cause you to make a life-changing mistake for you or somebody that doesn't deserve to have a life-changing mistake forced upon them. Mm-hmm. So we really try to focus on that leading up to the confrontation to prevent it. And I always say that 22-inch biceps, sleeve tattoos, and operator beards are not problem resolver that we think they are. The best fighters fight the least. Literally, that's how it is in police work. The best fighters, the best tacticians go to the hospital the least. And I've been to the hospital a couple of times when I wasn't the greatest tactician in my life. So,
I just watched the HBO documentary Ernie and Joe about the San Antonio police officers who were part of the mental health unit there.
yep.
And fantastic. And, it reminded me how much our communication is our first tactical tool,
Absolutely.
our ability to communicate, right?
Yep.
And how you sometimes forget that, or you forget how much it's still a perishable skill. We have to go through here in California, you have to go through annual communications post-mandated training or whatever, but
Right.
it's like the corny generic stuff.
Right.
But really, like, digging into how you communicate, how you present yourself. You said the operator beard and the sleeve tattoos. Like, that's one way to communicate something to somebody.
Sure.
But the way that, for example, that documentary, I highly recommend it for everybody. It starts with them coming in and talking to a suspect and sitting down, at his level and kicking their feet up. And it's like, it's so counterintuitive, but it's a way of communicating is what it is, right?
Yes.
So what, like there's thousands, tens of thousands of cops who've retired, who have a ton of knowledge, who don't share it. What is it about what you learned and your personality that you realized you need to go out and share this with people? What was that?
Because working in narcotics and the drug enforcement unit, I was fortunate to have the ability to work with cops all over the region, thousands of cops, and it astounds me what cops don't know. I mean, it really just blows my mind the lack of emphasis that we put on continuing our education. And this day and age, in the digital day and age with social media and the things that we have, there are so many opportunities each day to look at something, digest it in an intelligent way, in an intelligent manner, and use it to try and put yourself ahead of the game. Every day, all day long, videos just pour out on social media about police officer and violator and citizen contacts and interactions. Most of them use of force incidents or something that's going to get your blood going. I always say in my class, don't just look at it and go, man, that shit was crazy, and swipe right and keep on moving. Look at it and actually take that and use that as a piece of training. Training can be something as simple. If your mind is in the right place, if you're not using it to criticize other cops or ridicule other cops, if you're using it to put yourself in the right frame of mind, in case you come into an incident like this down the road, you could have already been there in your mind. And we all know that imagery and mental training is a huge part of law enforcement. And I personally think that it's a very important aspect of law enforcement. You can just take something as simple as a video, and if you digest it the right way, you don't just do I'd have just shot him, or I'd have punched that dude in the face. I mean, you're not there. You don't smell the guy's breath. You can't see his heartbeat in his jugular. You can't see the look in his eyes, his bloodshot eyes. We're not there. But what we can do is we can use the opportunity of the things that other officers experienced to help us right-size certain things in our brain, so that when that situation presents itself to us in real life down the road, because it's not if your day comes, it's when you're going to be involved in a critical incident in law enforcement, that you're a little bit better prepared. And that falls back to what I learned in my career with training. Probably 70% of what I know, I learned on my own outside of my police department. And the police department's provided training. I mean, I have a pretty decent resume, and I went to a lot of training on the department's dime. But I would still say that 70% of what I know and my deepest understanding of police issues and topics are things that I learned on my own, because I had some awesome influences in my life. And, I'll call this one guy Captain Bo. I mean, he was incredibly intelligent, and he inspired you to go out and learn things. And we can never stop learning. I mean, it's a career-long evolution. And those of us that close our minds and stop learning become stagnant, and we become the people that others complain about.
Gosh, that's so true, right?
Yes.
You don't want to be the guy that especially as a supervisor, the
Right.
last thing you want to be is the person who knows the least.
That's right.
And it's not fair to think that you'll know everything about every topic,
right?
Because we can't pretend that's just not possible. But in those, like you say, if you're a patrol sergeant, you better know search and seizure law.
That's right.
Right on top of your head, right? or same with dope buying and such and that sort of stuff. And Fourth Amendment, Fifth, like we need to be experts in that, regardless of what resources our agency gives us, because I want to keep my house.
That's right.
And in some states, it's very easy for somebody to take my house if I don't take it upon myself to stay current, right?
Right.
You mentioned your one mentor, and that's what I wanted to ask. It was actually a transition question right there. Was, none of us get through this career by ourselves, and we all have help. We all have assistance. And what I have found to be true in almost every scenario is how actual little control we have over our career.
That's
and
right.
I think that actually causes a lot of angst and a lot of stressors on police. But you may want to get into narcotics, but there could be a host of different issues that it just never works out for you, right? Or
Right.
it could be the air unit or canines or whatever it is. Like, timing is a huge factor. Who's in charge of that unit is a huge factor. The testing, and if you do a good job on the test on that day versus a different day is a fact. Like, all these things are relatively out of our control, and so we end up with career paths that sometimes don't equate to what we thought we wanted to do or what we
Oh,
hoped would be our career. How close was your career to what you wanted to map out, if had you mapped it out?
not at all. When I not, literally not at all.
That's a
We
great
we
answer.
talked about it in the beginning. I was a musician and an artistic person and pretty introverted before I got into law enforcement. A little bit of background. My brother was an alcoholic and a drug addict, and so when I came into police work, literally what I wanted to do was anything not related to drugs. I didn't want anything to do with drug enforcement because the whole thought of the thing disgusted me because of what my family was going through with my brother. What I wanted to do, being young and dumb and arrogant and being a little SAS dork wannabe, I wanted to be on the SWAT team so I could have an MP5 and a flashbang. So I did. I was lucky enough. I got on the SWAT team pretty early on in my career, but I ended up, my partner Brian and I, we had a chief. We were in the special enforcement unit, which was a plainclothes unit, and our chief comes to us and says, "You guys can go there for a year, and if you don't like it, you can leave afterwards, or I'm going to mandate you go there, and you won't have a choice of when you can get out." So Brian and I got forced into the drug unit, and I loved it. And I ended up spending the bulk of my career there. Every time I got promoted, I had to come back to the road for my probationary period at that rank, and then I worked my way back into the narcotics unit, and I loved it. I mean, I felt that, and this is one of my mentors, Captain Bo again. He said one time, in the criminal investigation division, we do police work at its purest. We don't ever have to stand a post. We don't ever have to work a funeral detail. We don't ever have to do all the things that the uniform guys have to do that no one comes into police work to do. I mean, let's face it, nobody comes into police work to work a parade route. Nobody comes into police work to escort a funeral out of a church and direct traffic and run the traffic light for the traffic detail. We come in to get the guns, the drugs, the bad guys, and the wanted people. That's why we come here. And in the job I had, I was lucky because we had some generational leftovers, and I was, at the time, the new generation. I had some really smart dudes working with me, smarter than me, and we kind of shaped that unit into what we wanted it to be. They moved on to different places. I continued on that path and ended up being in there for, I think at this point, maybe the longest out of anybody that ever stayed there in our department. If not, I'm one of the top 2 or 3.
Wow.
So it was very different. It was very different than what I expected it to be. And it made all the difference.
Well, yeah, it sounds like it. And to the point now where that's your area of expertise that you now teach, right?
Right.
So here's what I'm curious about now, because you've mentioned, I love this term generational leftovers, and I think we see that, it's just ongoing. And
sure, it's cyclical. It will always be that way.
It will always be that way. But the people who seem to succeed or who lead agencies into that next generation are the ones who are self-aware that they are now the way it is, or the way it's been done, right? Like, I've been in long enough to have started and been the new guy, right? Been the rookie, the guy that nobody knows, the guy that nobody trusts, and been here long enough to now, have a rank of sergeant, but then more than that, be in a position where, like, I'm looking at the new people like, who's that?
Right.
Like,
Right.
And they're looking at me as the old guy, the guy that's been around, right? The guy that's been here longer than, they've been an adult
Right.
for many of them. And I always wonder if I am becoming entrenched in my own dogma of the way I grew up with it versus the way that my command staff above me, who's, a little older and even more generationally left over, or generationally entrenched, I should say, versus their generation. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but I'm just curious
That's
how you stay
making complete
self-aware,
sense.
of the fact that you're now becoming the older guys who are the ones who argue for the way you've done it because you thought it worked better than the way the guys before you did it.
You're making complete sense, because that's a constant struggle. You know, a lot of the classes I teach. So I taught a class on last Tuesday. I taught a class for street cop, and probably 75% of the people in the class, I'm old enough to be their dad. And that's how it was in the last shift that I ran right before I retired. When I made it known that I was going to retire, they moved me out of narcotics so they could get somebody else in and get them up to speed. And I was back in patrol for 18 months before I retired. And literally, other than my co-supervisors on the shift, I was old enough to be everybody's dad on the shift. And you try to stay relevant. I try very hard to stay relevant. And I often sit down in front of my laptop and say, all right, we got to educate ourselves. We got to keep our ears and our eyes open here. And so that, because I've been to plenty of classes where that old retired cop that's been retired from the ATF for 25 years is teaching me how to do dope cases. And I'm like, he's spouting, this stuff is coming out of his face. And I'm like, wow, I can't even begin to fathom trying to do something like that in this day and age. So I don't want to be that guy. And so there's the drive to not be that guy. I think probably one of the most revolutionary things I ever learned as a cop came from this guy, Chris Whitcomb. He was, if I remember correctly, I think he was a speechwriter for Ronald Reagan before he went in the FBI. And he went in the FBI, and he's a Fox News consultant now. He's written a couple of books. And he was on HRT. And he was at Ruby Ridge. He was at Waco. And after Ruby Ridge, he was talking about how he was forced by the FBI to sit on an upside-down bucket in a muddy field and write a statement on the shooting of Randy Weaver and all the stuff that went on there on a yellow pad. And he was talking about, and I don't remember his exact words, but basically this is how I relay it in my terms now. Your agency is a juggernaut. It's not capable of living. It doesn't breathe. It doesn't feel. It doesn't care about you. It is a machine that will move forward. It was there before you. It will be there after you. Its job is to put people in bodies and uniforms and sectors to interdict and arrest evildoers. There are people in your agency that do care about you, and they show themselves to you rather easily, and you pick them out rather early on in your career. And those are usually the people that you latch onto for the remainders of your careers. And what it comes down to is, which cop do you want to be? Do you want to be the cop that nobody latches onto and doesn't take any value from, or do you want to be somebody that puts value out? I mean, I'm just a conduit. I just relay things that have been taught to me. I wasn't born with this information. I didn't pop out of the womb knowing the things I know.
As none of us do. So many, it's almost a cliche to say that we don't learn when we do things the right way. We learn from our mistakes. What are some of the things that you realize in hindsight were like, oh, that was a valuable lesson I learned. I had to learn it the hard way. Was there anything like that in your career?
Oh, everything. My whole career was like that. I mean, I always, this is another thing I always say, when I wake up in the morning, I'm stiff and sore because of my own stupidity. When I was younger, when I came into police work, I was trained pretty avidly in martial arts. I mean, very avidly, actually. I was really into it. And that probably continued for the first 10 years of my career. And almost immediately, I started teaching defensive tactics because everybody knew I was in the martial arts. Doesn't mean I knew how to teach defensive tactics. Because, and again, I was surrounded by some really smart instructors in our defensive tactics group. And along the way, we developed our curriculum to what I thought was really good. But along the way, we made some pretty serious mistakes. I'll give you a perfect example of a little mistake that we learned. We would do these force-on-force drills, these red man suit drills. Mm-hmm. And the students would come in and they would go through their use of force escalations. They would go to baton strike. And after they would do a baton strike, they would throw the batons on the ground when they move in to handcuff the guy. And of course, when we first started seeing this, we had the typical academy mentality. We'd grab them by the face mask. What are you doing? You had best unfuck yourself. Stop doing this. Use your brain, And as we grew, we realized this is our fault. This is our fault as a trainer, because under stress, you only have certain ways and certain mechanics to function and pull down choices out of your brain to perform under extreme stress. And if that option is not ingrained, you don't create a cognitive roadmap to that option in someone's brain, it's not going to happen. And so we never taught them what to do with their baton under stress after they do a baton strike or their OC spray. They were throwing that on the ground too. So once we went back and started training them what to do with them under stress, we fixed that problem. And there's a lot of things like that too. I almost got a good friend of mine killed in an operation because as a drug unit supervisor, I allowed us to rush. We were out running and gunning. We had done 3 buys. The last buy that we did was a buy bus where we had to use force on 2 separate people. It was right under a venue where a band was playing. It was loud. It was chaotic. And we had another deal set up and we rushed to it. And, we ended up a guy going to the hospital with a serious head injury with a between 30 to 50% chance of survival when he hit the door at the ER because of a lack of planning. After that, well, I'll tell you what, I was a meticulous planner. So I think we all evolve from the mistakes that we make, whether they're something small, like the training scar that I was talking about that we created as DT trainers, up to something big, like almost getting somebody killed.
What was that aftermath like for you? And that must have been heavy.
Yeah, well, this is the way I look at it. It was my fault. I was the boss on that operation. I was the guy driving the boat. If things were zigging when I thought they should zag, I should open my mouth. And I did. I did know better. I knew better at that time to not do it, to not rush, to not do a buy without briefing, to not run into a secondary operation. And we underestimated these dudes because they were juveniles. They were teenagers. And then here I got my big band of bearded thugs rolling around with me thinking, oh, we can take this. We got this. But like I said, the little things matter the most on the big stage. And we rushed into that and we got. I mean, they got us. I mean, we ultimately arrested all of them, but they got us. And the officer that got injured was one of the best cops I've ever worked with. And working in a specialty unit like that for as long as I did, the guys that you work in that specialty unit with are like family. I mean, you're with them more than you are with your family. So that was pretty heavy. So from there on out, an operational order for a buy bust operation for me, it was not a joke for it to be 10 to 13 pages long, so that every contingency that we could imagine was covered from that point on.
Mm-hmm.
And we slowed down. I mean, I'll tell you, early in my career in the drug unit, there was one night where our unit, we had 11 people working. We did 18 drug buys in one night. Averaging one every 6 minutes. Nuts. Stupid. Completely stupid. I mean, really just dumb. But at the time, we're like, God damn, we're rolling, boys. Let's go. But you're young and you're dumb. And you learn like that. Nobody got killed that night by the grace of God.
Right. Something to talk about on the show often that I got from David Klinger, Dr. David Klinger, is that idea of the preoccupation with failure.
Mm-hmm.
And you ask yourself, did we win? Did we lose? Or did we just get lucky?
Right.
And I think that we often frame our after actions in that way, we see that we didn't really win. We just got lucky that the bad guy didn't get the drop on us.
Sure. So you can measure how many guns, how many kilos. You can quantify those things. You can quantify hard statistics that actually come to fruition. You can never quantify or measure the things that you prevent by doing things the right way. So that's hard for us as cops. We like facts. We like facts on the table in front of us that we can see, that's tangible, that we can talk about. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to things that are hard to quantify, like what did we prevent by being good in the situation, we tend to not talk about that as much for some reason.
And it's a missed opportunity, I think, to help show officers what impact they're having. Right. I mean, that's saying what gets measured or what gets measured gets managed. And like you said, kilos, arrest stats, citations, those are easy things to measure. So that's what gets managed. That's right. Because I can tell exactly how many arrests you made in a month or citations you wrote or kilos you pulled off the street. But I have no way of knowing how many overdoses you prevented. Right. Or how many kids you prevented from getting kicked out of the house and going homeless because they didn't take their first hit, whatever it is, right? Like those are impossible intangibles to measure, but we still need to acknowledge that that is part of the job, and it's probably the most worthwhile part of the job for any of us.
Without question. And so, Kenny Williams is an instructor with us. He teaches Interdiction Mastermind. And, in our circle that we travel in, he's pretty darn famous when it comes to interdiction, as fame goes in the interdiction world. And one of the criticisms that he always gets, every time he puts up a post and he does a video, somebody sitting in his front seat with him, somebody always gets into the whole, I would never put someone in the front seat of my car to do an interview. And I always say, you got to put that into perspective. Right. So Kenny's out here. He's dealing with drug traffickers. He's taking measures. He understands this tactic, why he uses this tactic, what the purpose of this tactic is. And he takes measures to prepare for that tactic. And when he does that, think about Kenny Williams grabbing 1 kilo of fentanyl on its way to the city of Chicago, which is kind of in the area where he works. What could that 1 kilo of fentanyl do to our American citizens? I mean, what's the lethal dose of fentanyl? 200 micrograms. I'm terrible at math, but if you do the math, 1 kilo of fentanyl measures out to one hell of a lot of lethal doses of fentanyl. How many overdose deaths did he prevent? But as a SWAT guy, I'll go out and I'll throw my kid on and grab my rifle and I'll run up into a dude's house, his stronghold. I'll do a full frontal assault on a dude's stronghold where he lives, where all his weapons are, his means of ingress and egress, and he knows the ground, and I'll run right into his house for, an ounce of dope, and afterwards we'll fist bump and high five and be like, yeah, that was great, nice job, you were good. But how many cops are we endangering to do that? So the point is to put things that we do into perspective. And when you look at a guy like Kenny Williams that grabs that kilo of fentanyl, we can't measure what he prevented with that simple tactic that he uses, these simple tactics that he uses to get those kilos. Mm-hmm. But we will do this thing. From day one as baby cops, we have it pounded into our head. In baby cop school, they teach us, you are cop, you are God, they shall because you are. You will get, they will not get away. And we get hurt over that. We physically get hurt over it. And we get mentally scarred and wounded and over that mentality. Just like I talk about in Street Accounting, I talk about cops getting dragged by cars. And there's a whole lot of science to that goes into why cops get dragged. But I'm just saying, what about when the guy throws it in the dryer? What about you just step back and let him go? I mean, because in this day and age, unless he's an illegal entry into this country with no ID, if you can't identify them later with the use of technology and the investigative tactics we have, you probably ought to go find another career anyway. Yeah. So is the juice worth the squeeze to get drugged down the road at 60 miles an hour when your only good choices are at that point to shoot the guy driving or dive off the car at 60 miles an hour? Yeah. Why can't we just stand back and say, okay, catch you later?
After the riots and unrest of the summer of 2020, I began to get increasingly concerned about the fact that so much of my life is out there accessible to the public. I've been trying to figure out where that line should be drawn between what is shared on this podcast, on social media, or in interviews I give, and what should remain private for the security and safety of my family. Even though I'm a public person, that doesn't mean I want my personal information out there for the bad guys to find. I've arrested enough of them in my career that it makes me nervous to think my family could be exposed to those dangers. Not long ago, a suspect showed up at the front door of my partner's house 45 miles away from the station. I've had enough worry, but also I felt completely outmatched by the internet. I mean, it's the internet. Trying to take my name off of Google seemed insurmountable, and I learned that honestly, it is. But there's a lot we can do to protect ourselves, and that's removing our names from people's search sites and breaking the links between our home address and our names. I learned all this from my friends at officerprivacy.com, who are here to help me clean up the internet and the paper trail that is my life. A quick Google search shows a shocking amount of information about where I live, where I used to live, my family members, their names, their addresses, and even phone numbers. We need help protecting ourselves from the bad guys. You have partners on your beat, so get a partner on the internet. Check out officerprivacy.com for more information and learn how you can get started cleaning up the internet. How many times have you damaged your gear while on duty? Chances are it's a lot. So why don't companies have a protection guarantee to replace gear that has been damaged in the line of duty? CommGear Supply is the first and only tactical communication company that has a line of duty warranty that will cover the damages to some of your most critical communication gear. Every month, Com Gear Supply saves cops all around North America about $1,500 because they replace damaged gear due to cracked housing, pulled cables, water damage, and more. Me personally, I always pulled cables on my radio gear. From physical altercation to an accidental drop, Com Gear Supply has you protected with that line of duty warranty. You can find tactical headsets, push-to-talks, earpieces, mics, and so much more in their line of duty collection. You can also check out gear from Otto, Silence, Invisio, and other reputable brands at the best prices available. You can also check out gear from Otto, Silence, Invisio, and other reputable brands at the best prices available. Find all-time favorites like the Noise Barrier Micros from Otto or the XPR Push-to-Talk from Silence. With year-round sales, tax-free prices, and free shipping, you're guaranteed to get quality communication gear at a fair price. Go to comgearsupply.com right now and use that coupon code TheSquadRoom to get 10% off your order. Make sure you also follow them on Instagram at comgearsupply and let them know that you appreciate their support of the Squad Room. Yeah, we so often get locked into the options that we were trained on, or like you said, we get locked on to the idea that, ask, tell, make,
Right.
and that they're not doing what I told them to do, so I'm going to just double down on the either whatever, if it's use of force, or I'm going to double down on the verbal judo, or I'm going to double down on the command presence part. And like maybe the tactic is, like you said, take 2 steps back.
Right. Take it. I don't know who coined this phrase, but it certainly wasn't me, because I've heard it all over the place in the last 20 years. But take a deep breath and exhale the stupid things you are about to do. Because, and that phrase, take a deep breath and exhale the stupid, is literally my street academy class. The entire day is use your brain, take a step back and say, understand the difference between what's important and what's important right now. And is the juice, to be cliche again, is this juice worth the squeeze here?
Mm-hmm.
Is it worth me getting hurt or killed and creating a major secondary incident over a seatbelt and registration violation?
Right. We were talking about just now about metrics and managing and the intangible things that we do that are really the key elements of the job that just kind of go out there into the ether in the internet, or not the internet, the ether world of
Right.
we just don't know. But that requires faith, right? We have to have faith that what we're doing on a daily basis is making an impact. And
That's right.
Good supervisors and good leaders and good chiefs and good sheriffs will try to crystallize that for people and make it clear that there is an impact being made, even if you don't see it. But I'm curious about faith, that we have to have faith that when we come to work, we're doing the right thing and we're doing good work for the sake of the work, not for the plaques or the awards or the shiny medals. But I'm curious about faith in yourself too. You need to have some faith in yourself. And some of that comes from training and putting yourself through the training you need to make sure you go out and do the job safely and correctly and with as much skill as you can. But it also requires faith in yourself and your beliefs about yourself. So I'm curious, as you're progressing through your career, you clearly had a talent for narcotics because you kept getting put back there as you promoted up. What are the things that you believed about yourself that helped you become successful in your career, and how did it help you deal with hard times, that faith in yourself?
So working drugs, I had a why. Everybody needs a why. Why do you do what you do? And when I close my street academy class, I talk about find a why that you can get behind to help get you through these times. And my why was how, the way that drug addiction affected my family, specifically my mom and dad. And with my brother's drug addiction, my mom and dad, they're just a few of millions of families out there that are affected by this. And it, my why was always this: we've got a shadow government of a foreign nation on our southern border that runs armed incursions across the United States border every day. They have forward operating bases all over our country, and they run this shit up and down our highways to poison Americans for profit. That's my why. That's why I did what I did. And that's why I still do what I do, because there are cops out there that have their whys, whether it's human trafficking or child sex offenses or whatever it is that drives them, that they really get into. I mean, that's important. And when you have a why and you find someone, a mentor that has a why like that, like the guys that I looked up to in my career, they understand that, there's a greater common good involved. Like I said, when I was young, I was just a young SAS dork wannabe and wanted an MP5 and a flashbang. As you mature, you realize there's a greater common good involved here, and you can actually do some good. You may not be able to measure it or quantify all the good things that you've done by, all the things that you do in your technical job, but you can make a difference. And we are, as cliche as it sounds, the whole thin blue line thing is such a hot topic these days, but we really are the last bastion in the pushing of the moral boundaries in our country. I mean, you go to one of these crazy soccer matches in a foreign country where the entire crowd is pushed up against the metal barrier. Imagine this. The event staff walk up, they take that metal barrier and they move it forward 5 feet. Does the crowd stay where the metal barrier used to be? Hell no, they run right up against that thing, almost knock it over. And that's what happens in our country. We're pushing these moral boundaries, these technical boundaries that we have, like the whole defund the police movement. It's so counterintuitive and so anti-logic that it blows my mind sometimes. And it's the same thing with, when we're out there doing our enforcement, and this pushing of the moral boundary is going on, and that thin blue line, we are that last bastion that's preventing that boundary from breaking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so true. One of the fascinating things about the career, I totally agree with you. Everyone needs a why. You need to have it for yourself. It can't be your department's mission statement, because that won't work.
That's right.
It has to be for you. But what is fascinating is the different types of whys that are required to do the job, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's really the idea that police officer or deputy sheriff or constable or whatever your area calls it, the idea that one title can encompass everything we have to do and every different type of policing that comes into play is almost comical, right? So there's your why in narcotics, but we also need the SRO, the school resource officer, to have a real crystal clear idea of their why, of why they're interacting with the youth. We need a crystal clear why from our PIO, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who to understand that their why, what they're doing. Like, and as you transition between some of these assignments throughout your career, your why can change.
Sure.
But I think it's so imperative to identify that, label it, and like own it, right? Because we don't want people in any of those positions who don't understand what they're doing or don't understand why they're there.
That's no doubt. And sometimes that is a hard road. That is a hard road to follow sometimes. And I had my why. I was very, very outspoken about it at times, which caused a lot of, going head to head with a lot of my bosses sometimes. I tried to do it in the most diplomatic and respectful way as I could. I failed at that a lot of times. I'm an imperfect person with a very bright line switch from happy and diplomatic to loud and WTF. So I've gotten myself in trouble. I am certainly not perfect. I am the poster child for police stress sometimes. I mean, with struggling with your weight, struggling with your energy to get off the couch, divorce, all the things that we experience as cops, other than suicide and drug addiction, and alcohol. I was lucky because I never got into drugs or alcohol. I was very fortunate when it comes to that. But otherwise, between that stress and my own arrogance as I was young, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. And I think that is a huge educational process too. Mistake making is probably the best school out there.
You mentioned one of the mistakes that we often make. I'm laughing because I make it frequently. The interaction with your supervisors and failing to do that in a productive way. We'll put it.
Yeah.
What was your MO in that sense? Like how did you learn? What did you try to ask the question this way? What did you learn about interacting with your superiors or your command staff and how you needed to present an issue to get traction? Because I think a lot of young guys and gals have a lot of great ideas. They're either terrified of their command or they're inspired by their command. And it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of in between. But as you promote up too, and as you take responsibility for other people, you are going to be put into a position where you are required out of a moral obligation to the people you lead to push back on some things, right? You're going to get that stupid policy. You're going to get that stupid directive that goes against case law. You're going to hear, there are going to
Right.
be things where you have to stand up and be like, no.
Right.
And as someone who fails at that routinely, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you eventually navigated through that, if you ever did.
So, I mean, I think I got better as I got older, but at the same time, I was getting older, which makes us grumpier and more short tempered sometimes. uh, so what I hated from the beginning was I hated someone that refused to go to battle for me when I had a legit cause that I needed someone to go to bat for me on. So I hated that. And I look at a sergeant as the most important person in the police department, because when you reach that position, you no longer work for, and this is just my theory. You no longer work for the people above you. You're responsible to them to execute policy and direction and directives. You work for the people that you work with, your team, your people, your squad, your crew. That's who you work for. And your responsibility is to them, to train them, to provide them with correct, relevant, current information, to get them gear, and to get them to a spot where you can cut them loose and watch them go do their job. And if you see something zig when you think it should zag, open your mouth and say it. And by default, by doing that, I believe that the people above you will or should be happy. And all their policies and directives and executive orders should be getting executed to near perfection on the street, as close as they could get. That's a very altruistic view for me. For me, what miffed me was when I would go to a boss with, whether it was just in my eyes or it was everyone that I worked with eyes, a perfectly legit issue. And I would get, and I'll give you some quotes. I don't want to get into all that right now. Well, I'm not really interested in listening to that right now. Well, that's going to take too much work. So every now and then I would drop one like, well, isn't that your job? Or why don't you want to get into this? Because I am one of those people, if you tell me and give me an answer and don't tell me what the reasoning behind that answer is, it frustrates me to no end. And I don't think I'm that unusual when it comes to that. I think most cops are like that. And when you get told no, and I've had to tell people no before, when you tell someone no, you should tell them why. You should explain it to them. You look, we're at the end of the budget year. The money's not left at the end of the budget year. The city manager is going to come around and start reappropriating whatever's left over in your budget to do X, Y, and Z. This is why I can't get you this, that, and that. And come July 1, I'm on it. I promise. Mm-hmm. But, the answers of, I don't want to get into all that right now. Or that's a lot of work right now. Those don't cut it. And not just I don't believe that they don't just cut it for me. They don't cut it for anybody. Because again, it comes back to the why. And why am I out here if you're not willing to go do a lot of work for me? Because I'm doing a lot of work for you. I'm doing a lot of work for our city and our county and our state. So those were the things that frustrated me. The way I learned to navigate it was I learned if I was a sergeant and I wanted to get something from my captain, I found the right lieutenant that knew how to deal with that captain. And that captain that's particularly tight on the purse strings. He's very frugal when it comes to spending money, even though it's not his money. And it's things that we've budgeted for. Who's the best guy that can help me get through to him? So that's the one thing that I learned to do. And the other thing that one of my mentors, Captain Bo, taught me was document. Give them every reason under the sun and document it. So when it goes up to them, here's why our overtime expenditures are this high, this pay period, and really map it out for them and break it down in a way that nobody else breaks it down.
I love the idea. Yeah, I love the idea of enlisting the help of someone who's done it or who has a relationship, right? Because we are, as much as you would think, we are all evidence-based. You present the evidence and you get the decision in your favor. It's not that way.
Right.
And it is really built on relationships. And it's something that I had to learn the hard way, I think, in that sense. But, but also the explanation, the why. Presenting. And I think I have found my experience has been, if I have to say no to something and I explain why, even if they don't like the why, they at least understand. And they say, okay, there's at least a thought behind it. It's not just getting shut down just for the sake of getting shut down. And what's like the number one thing everyone complains about in their agency is communication, right? Like that's across the board. Everyone, there's not a cop out there, I think, I mean, I've never talked to a cop who's like, you know what, the communication in my agency is fantastic. They're sending me too much information about where we're heading and what our goals are and what we're like. Doesn't happen, and there's lots of reasons for it. But if we can just communicate, or if our bosses can communicate the reasoning behind some of these decisions, I think it would reduce the angst and stress on the line officers so much.
No doubt, because we are by our very nature inquisitive, or else we wouldn't be any good at what we do.
We're evidence-based, right?
Yeah, we're info seekers. You know, we are info seeking missiles. We want to know what's going on and why it's going on. And when someone shuts you down and don't tell that, it creates, like you said, tension. It's no different than physical or emotional tension. When you're going to a call and you can't get a cop on the radio and he's not answering his radio, what's it do to your adrenaline level? It sends it up. It creates that angst, like you said. It creates that angst. And when you don't have that information, you know, it might be completely harmless. You know, it might have just bumped it and it might have got clicked to channel 2 instead of channel 1, you know, and he may be just fine. But for the rest of us, that not knowing, that fear of the unknown creates that angst.
I think another thing, sorry to interrupt you.
That's all right.
Another way I think it is shown is, you know, if you're interviewing a suspect and you ask a question and they don't answer, or they give you a BS answer that you know isn't true, or they're being evasive, we are immediately right, suspicious and cynical about them, and as you should be. And so it's no different when a leader doesn't give an answer or refuses to answer a question. What do? We get cynical and suspicious about that answer as well, and we start to fill in the gaps, and often with wrong information about why they're treating us a certain way or why they're doing this to us, when it's probably a very plausible or reasonable explanation. It's just not being shared.
Right. And you know, we're just human beings also. Insecurity comes into play big time.
Oh gosh, yeah.
I mean, I'm just as insecure as the next person about a lot of things in my life, but you know, that can't have a place. It shouldn't have a place in what we do. I mean, I wasn't the fastest guy in the world. You know, I struggle with my fitness because of my stress level and the things in my life and all the various things I've been through. I struggle with so many things every day to day, just like every other human being on the planet. But when I came to work, I was actually very good at compartmentalizing that, or my outside life to my job. And all right, what's the next job? What's the next step? What's the next step? What do we got to do here? You know, Nick needs a new canine muzzle. I got to get Nick a canine muzzle. I got to run in here and I got to do a purchase order request for a canine muzzle. You know, I got to, those kind of things have to, because little things like that are important to cops. What is it you always say? What are the two things cops hate?
Changing the way things are, right?
Changing the way things are. And if we don't find that happy medium, then people start to gripe.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned it a few times, and it's one of the biggest lessons I think we could learn from someone who's had a career like yours, you know, that's dealing with the stress and struggling with weight. And how have you even found success in that, or even just progression, not success, maybe not even looking for success, but just a step better than it was? What are the things you've used that have helped you?
Well, my two biggest downfalls are I love food and I hate to cook. Absolutely hate cooking. So where does that leave me? Restaurants.
Yeah.
So, and you know, in the cop life, it can kick us all right in the ass when it comes to nutrition, because it's just the way we all know. We don't need to go into all the reasons for that.
Right.
So that me for dealing with stress is I love food. I'm a stress eater. Always have been, probably always will be. So dealing with that all throughout my life, and we all know that we don't necessarily recognize stress all the time either, until the bad behavior manifests itself.
That's so true.
Yeah, we don't necessarily always recognize it. And stress is aggregate. It just doesn't come, not like, oh, we had an officer involved shooting here. Okay, cop's okay. Everything's better now. Tomorrow's a new day. Oh, I just almost got a guy killed tonight on a buy bust operation. Next day, oh, everything's better. Even the little stuff, it just piles up and piles up and piles up and piles up. And literally, we may not have PTS from a single critical incident where, you know, like a guy I just met who's one of my new personal heroes, went to an active shooter and got his shift partner was killed and he was shot. He survived, and it's like 18 months ago. He's back in full swing now. Even if it's not something like that, even if it's all the little stuff that we go through for a period of 10, 15, 20, even 3 years can build up and can change us. If we don't recognize and understand that, And I think I'm good at recognizing and understanding it now. Like when I hit my 22-minute mark at Walmart, I know it's time to go because I can't be around people like that. So I recognize those little things. You know, my better half actually recognizes them too, and we talk about them. And since I've retired, I actually sleep like a human being now. And I can't tell you before I retired the last decade where I slept more than 5 hours a night, 3 nights in a row. Couldn't
Right.
tell you the last time. But that all comes into play. The key is to recognize it and understand it. That's why when I listened to your episode with Nick Wilson, I was like, I got to get this guy. And it was funny because I taught my class, and I came back and I logged into our program that we have for new instructor applications, and guess who was in there? He was. I'm like, I'm calling him, and I emailed him, and we talked the next day. And so that's why that's important. And that's one of the good things I think about Street Cop is we have a really well-rounded instructor lineup, and we've now really taken on a wellness approach where we've got guys like Tom Rizzo, who talks about wellness and leadership, and we've got Nick Wilson, who talks about managing the emotional trauma that law enforcement just heaps upon us.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a guy named Adam Davis, who's kind of almost like the spiritual aspect of self-awareness and officer wellness. And we just brought on a new Jenna Romano, who's a clinician that also deals in. So I think we have a really well-rounded approach. And in this day and age, you can't do anything less. As a department, if you're not addressing officer wellness and the stress that we incur, then we're just waiting for things like George Floyd to happen. Because I'm going to tell you right now, that guy, those 9 minutes and 30 seconds or however long that was, that officer, he's got some undealt with stress. Guarantee it.
Yeah, I thought the
no
same
question.
thing. I thought the exact same thing watching that video. Even on the first time, was like, that guy is checked out.
Mm-hmm.
Like there is something deep there. You know, one of the I want to do a whole episode on this one idea and a great resource for someone to learn about how stress accumulates in your body is a great book, The Body Keeps the Score, by Bessel van der Kolk. And it really goes into how people like us, or people in services like us, how your body, like you said, you know, almost got someone killed one day and you're back at work the next day and you think everything's good, everything's calmed down, everything's resolved. Like, your body's not there yet, and your body eventually just clicks into hypervigilance constantly. And so your body, even though you feel fine, you know, or you feel like at least less than panicked, your body is in a constant state of fight or flight, and your limbic system is stuck.
That's right.
And I'm just starting to learn about these things now, but that has an influence even on weight loss.
Absolutely.
You know, so you see heavier cops, like I'm the same as you, stress eater, constantly fluctuating in weight up and down. I've lost the same 10 pounds like 100 times. So I should be like 100 pounds right now.
Right.
A svelte 120. You know, but like giving ourselves some grace in that as well, and understanding that there are things physiologically within us that we can't prevent unless we know about them in advance. And I think that's where that wellness program stuff comes in. And so that cops can learn. I had a very traumatic thing happen to me today. It's okay to acknowledge it as traumatic, and it's okay to sit with it for a second and understand that I was scared shitless for X amount of time today, and process that, but then have productive methods in place to deal with that, rather than the things that we typically rely on, which is things like the overeating or the alcohol or drugs, or those things that cops go into, you know, the risky behaviors that are really just us off gassing a stress we don't know how to deal with, you know, an anxiety we don't know how to deal with. That is the biggest lesson I think anyone I could hope take from today and from talking with us is there's all sorts of great things you can do in this career. There are so many wonderful things that each have their own why, but your biggest why, the one that should really encompass everything that you do, is your own why about yourself. And the taking care of yourself, but also understanding you are this is gonna sound weird, but you are also a human, right? You are not RoboCop, you are not Super Cop, regardless of what the medals say. You are a person with a physiological system, a central nervous system that is not supposed to do what you do. It is
That's right.
not human to do this job.
That's right.
And so give yourself some grace and some tools and some tactics to understand from the get-go, from straight out of baby cop school, straight out of the academy, right? This is not a job meant for humans. So let's figure out how to navigate this correctly for the next 30 years together, and
It's
so
difficult.
go ahead.
It's difficult to recognize those things too, because a lot of times that stuck in hypervigilance, that's a slow build sometimes.
Oh, totally is. Yeah.
And it's a slow fix, because I can tell you that the whole hypervigilance thing, I'm still there. I mean, I'm a year and a half retired now. I'm not a cop anymore. I am at heart, but I'm not technically an active duty cop anymore. I find myself a lot of times, if I'm not carrying my pistol and I'm someplace, I'm like, I need my pistol. I should have my pistol on me. I need to have this. I go out to restaurants. I still do the typical cliche thing where I sit in the back corner with my back to the door. My better half, Ashley, she's always like, you want to be able to see the door? Where do you want to sit? She constantly, we went out to lunch yesterday. She's like, where do you want to sit? She lets me pick the seats because she knows. And that takes a long time to come down off of that high too. And I read Kevin Gilmartin's book, Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement.
Great book.
Game changer. I mean, I read that and I'm like, this dude wrote this book about me. I come home at night and I have that equal and opposite reaction. I'm high all night running from call to call to call with my hair on fire. And I come home and I hit the couch and goddamn, I can't move for like 6 hours. I can't even get up and go to bed. And when I wake up on my first day off, it takes me 24 hours to recover from the last 60 hours I worked, so that my second day off, I'm actually finally just getting to the point where I can function. And next thing you know, you're right back at it again.
Yeah.
And it takes a while to come down from that.
Well, and as that book details too, you really never do until
That's right.
Until you hit that retirement and you get that retirement badge and you're out the door, and then your body finally starts to unwind.
Right.
Like we exist in that for so long, and so we have to find the things that we do to be successful in that. And I think what you're doing with Street Cop is awesome. You're like you're part of the team now, not just an instructor, but you are in charge of onboarding and looking for new talent, looking for new instructors and vetting those. And so you're staying in the game, so to speak. And so, let's talk about that why again. And what's your why with that part of the work?
So, before I came on with Street Cop, they put out an infographic on their Facebook page. And I always refer back to this. This is our top 3 reasons we do this. Cops don't get killed. Bad guys go to jail. Cops don't kill themselves. And that's really what it comes down to. And to me, like I said before, it astonishes me what cops don't know and the information they're not just given. I even saw a guy the other day in a Facebook post say that in 7 years, he had never been taught that you need RAS to do a Terry frisk. I'm like, holy smokes. I just taught a class 3 weeks ago. They're where I was at, they're mandated to shoot every other year. I mean, come on. So at Street Cop, one of the things I love about Street Cop is it's a little bit gritty. I mean, I think we're a little bit gritty, and I say this, and this is no offense to the guys that have this, and if I have one thing I could go back in my career and do would be go to FBI National Academy. But how many times have you seen an instructor bio picture, and the instructor is sitting in suit and tie in front of his National Academy picture? And it talks about, no offense, because I know you have an MPA, but his master's in police masters in police administration, his master's in this, he's got that, and all these certifications. And you've got a 22-year-old cop looking at this, and whether he consciously or subconsciously thinks this, how do I relate to this guy? What does this guy have that relates to me? Even though this guy in front of the National Academy flag has been through all the stuff that he's been through, this guy, the young guy, is thinking, how does he relate to me? So for us, even though I always say it's tough being the oldest, ugliest Street Cop instructor, but even though, and I think I'm the second oldest now. We got brought on Tom Stack, who's just like a year or two older than me, thank God. But we have the bulk of our guys are active duty cops. They're still working police professionals. They're still out there and still, for lack of a better term, relevant to the young street cops that are out there that are just dying for the information. And I always tell Dennis this. I say, you're a way better businessman than you ever were a cop. and he's brilliant. I mean, he really is. He's got this business model of our classes are affordable for cops that want to pay their way and take a vacation day or two to come to, and they're affordable for agencies to send their guys to when it comes to budgetary constraints and manpower allocations and minimum manpower requirements because they're short. And I know I as well as the other instructors, I always say, don't go back and do this because Jeff Smith said do it. Take the thoughts and the ideas I give you and go home and crack a book, look at a video, understand, and I'll steal this term from Mike Doyle, who you've had on before, be a critical consumer of information. When you look at this video right here, don't go, God damn, that's crazy, and swipe right and keep on looking at other TikTok stuff. Actually take a second to look at this officer involved shooting or this incident that people were complaining about why the officers reacted in this way. And that's what I think we try to do. We try to look at what's relevant and what's important right now to cops. And the other thing that we do is we don't kill you by putting our lesson plan up on a screen and reading from it. You know, I always say to new instructors, if you've got 50 people in your class, that's people who have shelled out $10,000 to come and see you. You need to put on a $10,000 show. You need to give them $10,000 worth of information. And that's what we try to do.
One of the things that I think has been the most, I don't know what the right word is, but the most interesting, but that's not the right word. That sounds so like generic, but I guess inspiring is that your instructors, the one, you know, like you said, Kenny Williams or Tom Rizzo or Dennis or you or any of the other ones, they're active duty cops, but they're also like you said this earlier about, I think, Kenny, they're like rock stars in that realm as much as you can be in the, like, to be a social influencer or quote unquote rock star or famous as a cop is kind of a funny idea, right? To be famous amongst other cops, but the outpouring of support and commitment and like brand identity that I've seen in your Facebook groups and on social media towards street cop, and the fact that, you know, they emphasize servicing the street cop, no shock, right? Like really touches on the fact that there's a vacuum and a void where these guys and girls needed something like this to latch onto or to look towards as inspiration. And they finally have these guides, whether it's and frankly whether it's street cop or it's somebody else, you know,
Sure.
it's Tim Kennedy or Dakota Meyer or whoever, right? Because of social media, and the ability to put out a product there that everybody can see nationwide, it's really fascinating that people are planting their flag with it and aspiring to be a street cop. You know, I think it's really cool because we don't have those resources in many areas of the country. So anyway, go ahead.
It's interesting because, you know, one of the things that's broken with law enforcement training is that, you know, the training division at any police department has a lesson plan and they need somebody to teach it. And they're like, hey, come here. You're a state certified instructor. Teach this. All right. So what's interesting is I get a lot of emails from guys that want to be street cop instructors, and they say, ask them what your qualifications are. I'm qualified to teach Ivory Tower. Or I'm qualified to teach Interdiction Mastermind, or I'm qualified to teach the Street Smart Cop and Proactive Patrol Tactics. And I email them back and say, no, what do you have that you're passionate about, that you've become of your own volition an expert at over the years, that you are passionate about and have a drive to teach? Not because we don't hand out lesson plans. You know, we don't have 7 guys that teach the Ivory Tower. Tom Rizzo teaches it because it's Tom Rizzo's heart that's in that class. And it's incredibly important to Tom Rizzo to teach that class. So there's not a second instructor for Ivory Tower because that's Tom. That class is him. He shows up to give of himself in that class. And we don't do that enough in law enforcement. We don't place enough value on that in law enforcement training when we're still captive audiences. In other words, when we're an in-service trainer or mandated academy training, we don't place enough value on that. We place value on bodies and spots to fill manpower requirements and fill hours. And that's part of what's broken about law enforcement training. Look at Dr. Bill Lewinsky. I mean, you can't look at that guy and tell me he's not passionate about the science and the things that he teaches. And he's made himself an expert in his field, of his own volition. He's done that all himself. No one's made Bill Lewinsky who he is other than Bill Lewinsky wanting to be better educated in the topics that concern him and that he's passionate about.
Yeah,
And that
Bill
does
from
that.
Force Science Institute, for people who don't know who he is.
Yes, and we don't place enough value on experts in law enforcement. I mean, just look at a lot of agencies have rotational policies. You go into a specialty unit, in 5 years you got to rotate out. Well, in some specialty units, you're not even really good at what you do until you hit that 5-year mark. Now, if you're not relevant and you're eating Cheetos and stealing oxygen and just hanging out watching Netflix all day, yeah, it's time to rotate out. But we don't place enough value on guys that have made themselves experts in a topic these days, I don't think.
It's an interesting and it's a fantastic point. Where can people learn more about you, learn about how to take your class, other street cop classes, Jeff?
So our website is just simply streetcop.com. We're on Facebook. We have a private law enforcement only Facebook group. We have a public Facebook group, and we actually have a new Facebook group because we've had some run-ins lately with Facebook and some issues with that. And we're just plugging ahead, and we're on Instagram. Street Cop, we have an open group, and we have a law enforcement only group on Instagram. And I'm on all of those things. I'm just Jeffrey S. Smith on Facebook and JS Smith 62 on Instagram. And all our schedules are out there. We've got 25 instructors now. We've got a ton of classes. Just since I've been with Street Cop, I think we've at least more than doubled, almost tripled the number of instructors that we have. And we've got about 5 or 6 in the pipeline that we're ready to bring on some really interesting classes.
Amazing work. I'm so glad to see there's a demand out there for it, because it just means that, each cop that goes is taking it upon themselves to get better, to learn something new, and to see that the demand is there is just, especially now, at this time, at this day and age, when there's a whole bunch of people who are wanting to leave the profession, or they are hating on the profession, and they feel stuck. You have a whole other group of people who are out there doing the best work they've ever done, because
That's right.
they're continuing to improve themselves. And those are the men and women who are going to lead us into the next generation.
That's right.
It's awesome
Absolutely
stuff to see. So, Jeff, thanks for your time today. We'll put show notes, or we'll put links to all of the Street Cop stuff, all of your social media and all that stuff. We'll put it into the show notes so people can just scroll down and click on that there to join, or to follow, or to sign up for their next Street Cop class. So appreciate your time today, Jeff. Fantastic conversation.
Awesome. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be on here with you.
All right. Thanks for listening to this interview with Jeff Smith. I often talk on this show about badges. That's my acronym for everything I do about self-awareness and mindfulness, and just trying to keep myself moving forward, right? Badges. And it's an acronym, if you haven't heard it before: beliefs, actions, discipline, goals, emotions, and service. And I think, and I have found through my own struggles, through my own journey, that if I can look at any problem through the lens of those 6 points, that I can, at least start to move forward, and I can often reevaluate and reframe a challenging issue, a challenging thought, a challenging emotion, and it helps me move forward. And I always like to look at our guests and what they talk about in the episode through that same 6 points of badges. And Jeff's no different. For example, with Jeff and his beliefs, and how he's willing to challenge those now, even as a retired cop, he's challenging his own beliefs about the way that things were done when he did it. He didn't assume that he did them the right way, but he's also challenging his belief that his way is the right way. He's always learning, and he's always open to new ideas, and he's always seeking the best answer, whether he has it or not. And then actions, a guy who's really paying it forward by using 29 years in law enforcement to turn around and teach another generation of cops how to go about the job safely, I think is great. Jeff was honest about his own struggles with discipline, something I struggle with as well, and how, he has ebbed and flowed in that in his own career and his own life, but has recently, really made some significant gains in that. And goals, he's a guy who he's retired, and he's probably busier than he ever was as a cop. And he's always looking forward and moving Every time we talk, he's got a new mission, or he's got some new project he's working on, or he's launching, or he's doing something for Street Cop, or he recently remarried, and congratulations again, Jeff. He's always got a goal that he seems like he's working towards. And then emotions. And he's a guy who, my take on it was, for a long time, wasn't willing to talk about those emotions, wasn't willing to address them, or wasn't even willing to look at them for himself, but has realized towards the end of his career, and now certainly these days, how important those things are. And he's really willing to take an honest self-assessment of where he's at emotionally, and even talk about that openly like he did on the show today. And then, of course, service, where he is still very much in service to law enforcement community through all of his teachings and his instruction. And, he's out there making cops safer, which is making the community safer. So he's a guy who's absolutely still in service. And I'm just really happy that Jeff and I have been able to connect. All right, I want to offer you something I'm very excited about. It's Tactical Tuesdays. It's a free weekly email where we bring you a few tactics, some tips, some strategies to help you succeed in the week ahead. It may be a book I want to share, gear I found useful, an inspiring quote, or anything else I think you might like. To sign up for the Tactical Tuesday email list, you can visit thesquadroom.net/Tactical Tuesdays, or just text me your email address to 805-364-2331. That's 805-364-2331. Make sure you include your first name too, just so I know you're not a bot. But shoot me a text with your email address, and I won't spam you, promise. And if you didn't catch that phone number, it'll be in the show notes. You can just check it out there. But yeah, we don't sell your address. We don't spam it, nothing like that. It's just for adding you to the list. But before we wrap up, I have a challenge for you. If you got something out of this episode, this conversation with Jeff, if you were inspired by this conversation, I want to challenge you right now to take a photo of your podcast player as you're playing this episode. And I want you to share it with 3 friends, people you think need to know what we talked about today. Send them this episode and recommend they listen to it. Often on many of your players, you can even forward or share the episode directly to them in a text, and you don't even have to do the screenshot. Also, I want you to consider, if you would, please consider leaving a review on the podcast player of your choice. Spotify now allows reviews. It's very helpful to get a review, especially one with some narrative or some language, some wording to it, because it really does help us spread the word about the show. It's very important. And also join our Facebook group and follow me on Instagram at The Squad Room. Special thanks to our sponsors for today's episode, Com Gear Supply. If you're looking for the best prices on the industry-leading warranty coverage, I'm getting tired. It's late here. If you're looking for the best prices and industry-leading warranty coverage on your radio equipment, make sure you check them out and use the coupon code TheSquadroom to get 10% off your order. And also make sure that you give some major thanks to our other sponsor for tonight, OfficerPrivacy.com. If cleaning up your name on the internet and making it harder for criminals to find you is important to you, and it should be, check out the deal at OfficerPrivacy.com/TheSquadroom, where you'll get a free USB data blocker and a 1 month of monitoring when you sign up. Also, there's some other great companies that support the podcast. Go to thesquadroom.net/support to see exclusive deals from Signature Coins, Hard to Kill Fitness, Onnit, Ranger Up, Hardhead Veterans, and Audible. All right, until next time, take care of each other and stay safe.